Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes. From the first to the worst, we're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, a self-proclaimed sugarholic, Kathy Barron, a sarcaster, podcaster, and editor-in-chief who's here to talk not only about the show Women Who Sarcast and the magazine Women Who Podcast, but also a musician crush on the cornflake girl herself, Tori Amos. Kathy, how are you?
I'm good, Kendra. Thanks for having me on and talking about my musician crush. There were so many to choose from, and the categories that you sent me were just so overwhelming. The first thought that came to my mind was Tori, so I just went with it.
Always go with your gut instinct when it comes to a crush. But before we get into all things Tori Amos, can you please let the people know where they can find you and the podcast and the magazine online?
So Women Who Sarcast podcast is on Instagram at Women Who Sarcast and wherever you listen to podcasts. And Women Who Podcast magazine is on Instagram also at Women Who Podcast magazine and on our website at womenwhopodcastmag.com.
Righty. Well, there's so many places we can find you. But let's talk about this Tori Amos, because some people think that crushing stops at a certain age, that it's just for teeny boppers in their rooms with Tiger Beat magazines, but we crush from the moment we first see an animated character we love to the moment we pass away, that we croak. I think crushing is a lifetime thing, and that's what I believe. And for you, this musician crush didn't start until like your early 30s. But I do want to know, who were some of your like foundational crushes in music before Tori Amos?
Well, I have to admit and confess that I wasn't very musically cultured growing up because I grew up in a very small town. And so like hard rock was pretty much the standard for every household, like AC/DC. I mean, America was thrown in there. The song Funky Town we played once in a while, but I wasn't really cultured until I moved to California, of course, because California has that effect on people. And that's when I started getting into like the alternative music, English beat, those, DJ Shadow. I was introduced to him, not personally, but when I moved to Portland, and that's when I saw Tori, was it in Portland. And so hanging around, that's when I worked at Trader Joe's. So there's a ton of musicians and artists and creatives, as you know, that work at Trader Joe's. And so they really introduced me to some really independent local music. So that was really cool to be cultured that way. So in the early days, it was more like AC/DC, Meatloaf, all the goodies.
Yeah, I've worked with, like, music's kind of been like the base of what I've done with work since I left college. I actually met this woman. She like handled kind of the PR and emails for this older gentleman who did country music in Texas. She's a photographer. Her music crush, and I think lifelong crush, is Meatloaf. So it's funny you mentioned her. I was like, okay, girl.
Something by the Dashboard Lights, right? Yeah, and that was the perfect song to mess up and like put in your own lyrics, because it was just so epic that it didn't matter what words you were singing. It all made sense.
I do that for so many songs. I'm like, wait, well, that's what you've been saying all these years? I'll just say it my way. So let's travel back in time. You're in Portland, you're working at Trader Joe's in your early 30s, you're heading out to see Tori Amos. Were you just like a casual fan at that point? Were these free tickets? Like, what made you go out and see her that night?
They definitely weren't free tickets, unfortunately. The woman that I was dating at the time, she and I went to the concert, and we were like up on the balcony, but I think it was the Schitzner or some small venue. So it didn't matter where you sat. You had a great view of Tori. So I'm not sure what prompted us to go. Maybe because she liked the music too. We just decided to go, and probably had to work overtime to pay for the ticket. And I was thinking this morning, I actually have an English Beat t-shirt on, so avert your eyes. But I realized that I don't think I ever got any merch at that show. And it was probably because I was so poor that I couldn't afford the, $15 t-shirt at the time.
I know it's hard to like you're like, well, I already got the ticket, especially nowadays. I mean, the merch is always going to like be an additional cost, but even $15 then, now they're like 35, 45 for a t-shirt. And you're
Almost the
like,
same as price as a ticket sometimes.
yeah, thank God Ticketmaster can't like be like, well, here's a service charge for the ticket or for the shirt, and then here's another charge for
Right.
it being like cotton. Because God, they tack on,
Hmm.
and you don't even get a physical ticket nowadays. Which I was talking to my husband is very very sad. That's kind of like the little merch you can have and keep, and now we don't even get that.
Yeah, like keepsake for memories,
Hmm.
put in your scrapbook. Yeah, I don't
Hmm.
have that either. And I
I
just thought of something. I also saw Gem. Do you remember Gem?
and the holograms.
No, Gem is
Oh.
a singer, and I saw her in Portland too. That's when she was just first starting out. Anyway, that's a side note.
I was like, wait, no, I have not seen the holograms live. Did they tour? That'd be really cool. But back to Tori, you said it was the moment that she straddled a piano bench while playing two pianos that really set the crush in motion that night. What about that moment, although I can maybe guess, made you go, yeah, there's something here. A crush is developing.
Well, I mean, come on, you can just visualize that, right? And I think for me, I tend to crush on people that are creative in general, and musicians is definitely one of those people because I think I mean, probably because I envy them because they can play music. I can't. I don't have that gift. But to me, it's just raw, and for people to like spill their feelings and emotions out into a song. I don't know. It just really raw to me. And in that moment, Tori was raw, straddling, because she's wearing like a sundress or something.
Mhm.
So, you get that image and she's straddling the bench and she's playing two pianos at the same time. It's like, that's like raw talent right there. So it was just, I wasn't expecting it. And when it happened, I was just like, whoa, okay.
You remember what song
cool.
it was?
I don't. It had to have been one of her, like, maybe it was Cornflake Girl because there's a lot of piano in that. It could have been one of her blockbuster ones. And she also had like this teeny tiny piano that she played on too. So
Like a child size or
yeah, it was tiny that
Hmm.
she played.
Yeah, it is something magical to see. Like, I think the piano is something I love to watch played live, and drums. I'm usually watching the drummer whenever I go to
Me too.
concerts because they're just like they have to move the entire time. It's so exciting, and I just don't have arm strength like that.
Well, I actually took drum lessons years
Oh,
ago. And when I moved into my place that I live now, I actually bought a drum set that was like electric drum
mm-hmm.
set. It was a really nice one. Just to kind of like, I'm not good at all whatsoever, but it was nice to just kind of, it was good for stress, honestly. But I sold those because I live in a studio and I needed some space and I wasn't really playing them much. But I still have my practice pad and my drumsticks that I can still pound away on my practice pad. So
Were the drums one of those pandemic hobbies, or was this before?
it was before when I lived in
Okay.
Santa Fe,
Oh.
New Mexico in 2008 or 9. That's when I started taking drum lessons from a pretty famous drummer there. And then didn't really do much with it until about 4 years ago when I bought this set. So, and then I started taking drum lessons here in the Bay Area.
It's cool. Yeah, I was gonna say I got a ukulele during the pandemic, and I tried like for like you. I'm not musically inclined. Like that's just something that doesn't click in my head to like move my fingers that way. So yeah, it's in the bag. Maybe one day I'll
Well, you
try.
should try drums because, you just kind of like flail your arms and, hit things. It's very therapeutic.
Yeah, that seems a little more freeing. And plus, I have huge, like my dad, thank you, dad, gave me these huge hands. So ukulele, it just looks crazy. Like I just can't. I'm like, where are you supposed to put it? But anyway, with musician crushes, sometimes it is just about the music. Like with me, it's like Garth Brooks. I don't find him physically attractive at all, but his voice just does something to me. And the
Mm.
same with Rob Thomas from Matchbox 20. But for you, like, is the crush with Tori just musically, or is there another layer of attraction to it?
No, I think it's definitely musically. Like I said, I think the talent is very attractive to me, being talented like that and being able to I mean, with any musician, it's like being able to just let yourself go and be an entertainer up on the stage. I mean, you expose yourself. So you have to be able to be vulnerable, right? In
Mm-hmm.
front of total strangers with, thousands of total strangers. And, to me, that's attractive. And probably because I would never be able to do it.
Mm-hmm. You just be flailing your arms everywhere
Yeah,
on your
but
drum pad.
I wouldn't, yeah, I wouldn't be able to hold a beat probably.
Yeah. And then you just get to call it experimental music and then go from there.
Exactly. Exactly.
You said that like you're attracted to the creativity of it. Has that always kind of been the underlying common denominator of like a lot of your crushes if you think back to it?
Definitely. Definitely. Whether it's a musician or a painter, slam poetry, anything, creativity is vulnerability. And so I think it takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there and be vulnerable like entertainers, musicians, artists do. It's not easy.
You think that like led you to like live in places like Portland and the Bay Area because those are widely known for artists?
Definitely. I mean, I moved to Portland from California, from the Bay Area to get out of the Bay Area because it was just getting, even like that was 2001, it was getting too congested and they were putting up those cement walls on the 101.
Mm.
And I was just like, I need to get out of here. So that's why I moved to Portland. I didn't have a job. I barely had a place to live. And so and I didn't really know Portland that well. So working at Trader Joe's was like the perfect thing because I met these amazing artists that were working grocery to do their art. And then they introduced me to, the Portland music scene. And then I moved to Seattle to go to art school. So to learn video production because I wanted to shoot documentaries, this one in particular about migrant farm workers. And so Seattle has an amazing music scene. Although I will say Portland, I think, has the better music scene.
Mm-hmm.
Don't hunt me down and kill me for that one. But I just felt like Portland had a real, as far as like the community was definitely there as far as the music scene. Seattle definitely has a great music scene. And I saw quite a few artists in the little venues around town. But that's the kind of, places that I like to live. Yes, definitely. And be able to walk to restaurants and, coffee shops and pubs and whatever from where you live is amazing. And be able to do that, just walk downtown and walk into some venue to go see somebody that you've never even heard of is really cool to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always nice. But I have to admit something. I cannot name you a single Tori Amos song.
Well, girl,
like,
I got a
like,
list right here
yeah,
for you.
like she is one of those names in music that I have known forever, ever since I was little. I grew up like I had VH1 before I had MTV, so my music. That's
Mm.
why I love things like Matchbox 20. I was like that little 8-year-old with my adult contemporary love. Like I was like her. Like Sheryl Crow was my girl as a kid. I was like, oh,
Oh,
I'm
sure.
so deep. Yeah, I was like, I'm so deep, loving every day is a winding road. I was like, that is poetic. I'm 8. What did I know about life yet? So I got nothing without Google when it comes to Tori Amos. So as someone who's a stranger to her catalog, what album would you say is like the one that you'd suggest to get me to like crush on her musically as much as you do?
I would say Scarlet's Walk, 2002. And for me, it's not like a whole album that I made a list of songs, and I actually had to look up the album in the year that was um, printed, published, recorded, whatever you want to call it. But the two songs that are kind of like my favorite, one is called Spark, and that's from 1998, from the Choir Girl Hotel album. And then Taxi Ride is 2002 Scarlet's Walk. And the reason why I like Spark is there's this lyric that's right off the top. This is how she starts the song. The lyric is, she's addicted to nicotine patches. Like, how could you not love that song with that one lyric? And then it goes into, Tori Amos. But her lyrics are pretty, if you understand them, if you can understand what she's saying, like with any song, they're pretty impactful. And, I think they resonate with a lot of people. I think her music's very, like, unique and it's kind of like upbeat as well. Like the Cornflake Girl, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
No.
It's kind of like upbeat, and then Little Earthquakes is very like deep, and so she has her assortment and her variety of different tunes. And I think, some people might call them like emo almost, but I don't know if I'd go that far.
Yeah, I was thinking about emo music the other day. I grew up an emo kid in the early 2000s, representing like Fall Out Boy and all that stuff. And I was like, where does this date back to? And I was like, music's always been kind of sad. And I was watching, there's a new docuseries on Hulu called Rewind the 90s. Check it out. And there was something on there that made me think, oh, that could be like the grandfather or the grandmother of emo, but now it's like escaping me. I'll try to think of it. Because I watched the one, they did it kind of like, what episode? The Teenage Culture was one, which was really cool. And then they did like comedy and how Elaine from Seinfeld was kind of like this modern, like she gave women a voice. It's a really good documentary. I haven't gotten to one about like music, so I'm wondering like, where did they even get this? But anyway.
That does sound interesting. I might check that out for sure.
What is weird though is I thought it was over by episode 4 because they talked about like the fear of the future and Y2K and that technology and how Furbies were like public enemy number 1.
Furbies.
Like, because like I was a kid when Furbies came out, so obviously I'm not watching like all these like CNN like things about it. So I was like, I just remember them being stupid, not wanting one.
I never had a Furby.
They're so dumb. I've never really liked those kind of things, those toys. But I was like, you can't really play with it. It's not a Barbie. You can't dress it up.
Yeah.
Screw that.
See, I was the Cabbage Patch Kid era. And I made some joke in college, and one of my roommates got me one, and I'm like, really? Could you give me something else a little more, something that I'd actually use?
I had one. I still have it. She's up in the attic. But my brother, he was like an 80s kind of like metalhead horror movies. He made me watch Chucky. So I was scared of her. So at night, I would put her in the toy box and then put heavy stuff on it. And,
Nice.
and I was like, all right, biatch, like you can't give me the night. But during the day, I was like, she's not going to kill me during the day. Like I had that mentality. But,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
I love that.
Thanks, Dwayne. For
Killer Cabbage Patch Kid.
I mean, it would have been terrifying. They are really creepy when you look at it. And their little yarn hair, how they're bald in the center.
Yeah, and then you have to pull their pants down to see their name or something. It's like, that seems a little illegal right now, but it's just like, can we not pull its pants down to see what name it is? Or what year it was born or whatever was on their ass? I don't know.
I'd have to go see if she has that. I don't know if my girl she has that bald head yarn hair, but I'd have to, now I got to go disrobe her and see if she's got her identification. So back to Tori, did you like see her in concert after that initial piano bench straddling?
No, that was the only time I saw her in concert. And looking her up for this podcast, I didn't realize she's only 4 years older than I am. So that's kind of scary.
Scary in a good way, scary in a bad way?
Well, I'm trying to think back to when I saw her, because if she was only 4 years older, then she was probably in her mid 30s, which was pretty much the same, obviously, close to my age. So maybe there was an added attraction because she was close to my age. I don't know.
That always plays into it. On here, we kind of think like, especially for celebrity crushes, I talked to Ken from the Mr. Gentleman podcast, and as a kid he loved one of the Cosby kids, the one that was like closest to his age, because like in your head you think, well, if I ever meet them, it can sparks can fly, because we kind of have that at least we have that when we were born. So I think that does play into it for sure, which makes we got into like, well, who do kids crush on now? Because there's no Macaulay Culkins in media like there once was, a JTT, if you will, Rat Pack. So I was like, who are kids crushing on? These weird YouTubers?
Oh, that's even worse. See, that to me is dangerous. Because they're real people. I mean, not to say that the actors aren't real, but it's like they're actors. And so they play a part. And normally you're crushing on the character first and then the actor. I mean, that seems how I would do it. But with YouTubers, I mean, they're real people. They're not actors. So that's a little weird to me.
And going back to what you said, you were attracted to talent. So it's like, are kids today, like, do you think you would have a crush today? Would there be someone that talented you could look to?
I don't think, I mean, I'm rarely ever on YouTube unless it's for a self-help thing. So that would be a no. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, even the music today is not quite, I mean, Taylor Swift, yeah, but I don't really have a crush on Taylor like the Swifties do.
Yeah, it's an intense one.
Yeah, it's yeah, Taylor, the Swifties, it's a whole cult basically. And Taylor's great. She's very, very talented, and she knows how to, she's a definite capitalist, definite businesswoman.
Very
she
strategic.
Knows how she does things, and I don't know if it's her that does that or if it's the people that manage her music. It seems like a lot of it is from her. But yeah, she's pretty smart all around, and I don't know any musician that really does that. I mean, Beyonce, but
I would say those two have, like you said, either great teams or just they're really smart and maybe took some business classes in between laying their set. What I love about Swifties is like they're 2 steps away from like the tinfoil hat people, because they're like, I saw this one, they were like, Taylor Swift performed this song on 8/7 while she was secretly dating Travis Kelce, whose number is 87. And I was like, I don't know. Like,
all these conspiracies.
Like I'm always like, are these real? And it kind of can suck you in, and you're like, I don't know, maybe this is real. But
well, you heard about the whole jet, right? The whole Jets thing.
Oh, yes. This is the long game for her to see. I was
well, she was getting bashed, I guess, in the news because of her footprint, her jet
the carbon,
the carbon footprint. And so then this conspiracy is, or the theory is, that she went to see Travis play against the Jets, and so then that would have come up on Google search first. So whether that was strategic on Taylor's part or if it's just people being people, we'll never know. But that's what I've heard.
Oh, I was talking about she was photographed in an Eagles like shirt or something, merchandise, and then because the Chiefs beat the Eagles, this is her long game to get back at him. I was like, what are we doing?
Her long game.
Like, you guys are crazy. Thankfully, Tori Amos came up in a time where there was like very limited internet. People could not do all this stuff. So you haven't seen her since, but if you could go see her tomorrow and you could pick the like perfect set list, what song would you want her to open with? What song would you want to go on stage for? Maybe like sing along with her if you got the chance. And what song would you want her to end the night with? So 3 songs.
3 songs. Okay. Um, I think she should open with Spark and then end with Little Earthquakes. And then I'd probably go sing the Taxi Ride song. Those are like my top 3 songs. Because one of the lyrics that I like from the Taxi Ride song is, "You think you deserve a trust fund just because you want one." And I really like that line because living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, there's a lot of trust fund people, or at least people that think they should have a trust fund. So yeah, those would be the 3 songs.
I don't know if there's a lot of trust fund. Probably today there still is, but I think like you say, your Cabbage Patch kind of generation, the '80s was overflowing with trust fund kids, and that I'm just like, ugh, these people. So I grew up very poor, so I wish I could have. I'm always like, my grandma, like the thing was like, we're always like, well, what is she gonna leave us, you know? And I was like, she collected cat figurines, and so me and my mom's joke was like, which cat figurine are you gonna get? So when she finally passed, I got the bookends.
The bookends.
Yeah, I got the cat bookends, and my mom's like, well, you get your cat figurine now. It's like, oh, happy day.
Yeah. I mean, that's the same with my family. I mean, I'm the youngest of 6 kids, and, you know, we grew up in a small town and we didn't have money either. And, you know, my mom lives on the Central Coast in a mobile home park, and, you know, we're going to have to take that mobile home out into the desert and light it on fire because nobody's going to buy it. It's it's not in poor shape, but it's from the 1960s, and you know, she's been living there for 30 some odd years. But I always joke about taking it out to the desert. Maybe we can donate to Burning Man or something.
I mean, I'm on the same page. My mom's my grandma bought it in like, I think, the 70s, and it's the trailer my mom's lived in. And when she's actually said it belongs to my youngest brother when she goes, and me and my older brother were like, good. Why would we want it? It's falling apart. There's one part in the kitchen you cannot step in on. You will go through the floor. So yeah, I totally feel you on the trailer. I'm like, yeah, you can have it. The only thing I told her I want, she collects Coca-Cola products. And she has like a really old vintage, very heavy actual payphone that is Coca-Cola. And when I cleaned her house once, I was like, that was the one thing I couldn't move. And she's like, oh, your aunt wants it. I was like, that old decrepit lady is not outliving me. I was like, she outlives you is one thing. She's not outliving me. So I was like, it's gonna be mine. I was like, I'll fight her for it. Girl. But yeah, the trailers, I'm like, you guys really think we want these things?
Yeah. No.
Does your mom still have shag carpet?
No, I think she got new carpet. I mean, the carpet probably needs to be replaced at this point, but no, they replaced the carpet, I think, once since they've moved in there.
Same. It was yellow, like decrepit from the 70s, and finally, I think in the mid 2000s, she got it finally replaced. And just the smell alone, the difference is crazy. So before we talk more about you and your shows and magazines, if you had the chance to live your life with your musician crush, Tori Amos, what do you think your lives would be like?
Oh, let's see. Well, I would definitely go on the road with her. It would be all about Tori because, you know, I'm not the talent. I'm not the person that people want to see. I do photography, so maybe I would be her photographer on the road, you know. I think it would be pretty cool. She seems like a pretty chill person and seems spiritual, kind of Zen-like. So I think it would be... I think she's the type of person that can be Zen, but also tell you off at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, if she wants something done, she will let you know. But I think it would be cool to, you know, go on tour and just see the world together.
And for you, it'd be like, since she's the one that has to do all the, you know, she has to get out and perform. You could just like wander during the day, and it would be, I think, a nice life.
I think
Nice.
so. I'd polish the piano benches so that she could
Straddle them.
straddle them without, getting blisters or be
Sounds like a chill
comfortable.
life. I like
Yeah.
the life. I would love that, just to be on the road. But I also love my home as well. So I don't know,
Hmm.
I might get homesick, but
I'm kind of the same. I would have to be like maybe 3 or 4 months on the road and then the same at home.
because like all my stuff's here, and I love my stuff. I like all wall art. That's my husband's like, let's get a van. I was like, you can't put art in a van. No, why would I want to live there? I have to have all my art. It's like, do you really need your art of like Power Rangers and all this stuff? I'm like, yes, I need to see it daily.
So a
So
tiny home is not in your future.
it was like you're like, because 600 square feet is like what they consider a tiny home. So if you got a small house from like the 30s or something, maybe you could pass it. But I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. And I mean, my guy's 6'3". I'm 5'8". Could we really
Oh,
do that?
yeah,
No.
probably not. Because
Mm-mm.
6 feet is probably the length of the tiny home.
And our first apartment in the LA area was less than 500 square feet. And we did that for 4 years. And when COVID hit, we did, by that October 2020, we were like, we need more room because he was working at home with me. And I
Right.
was like, this is too much. So COVID pushed us into at least a 2 bedroom. We're like, wow. And now we moved out of California and we could rent a whole house. It's crazy when you leave,
It's amazing, isn't it?
when you break that chain. I thought I would never leave California. And now I don't think I'd ever go back.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do that. It's like I'm kind of on that boat too, as far as, I like California, but I certainly don't like the rent prices or the food prices or the gas prices. But I don't
Yeah.
know, I probably wouldn't go back to the Pacific Northwest. I wouldn't go back to Santa Fe.
Mhm.
And I have no idea where I would go if I was
It's
going
hard.
to.
It's hard to pick a place because California is so perfect in a lot of ways, except for the cost, but everything else
Hmm.
about it's great. But you're like, oh, you don't want to chance it. I went to Virginia and
Hmm.
that was fine. Now we're in Columbus, Ohio. And
Oh,
it's pretty
okay.
okay because you get the city
Columbus.
vibe.
Yeah. I've heard good things about Columbus.
It's really cool. It's cold, that's for sure, but I'm a homebody, so I'm like, does weather really impact me? I'm not an outdoor person. But so we talk about Tori Amos, we talk about the straddling of piano benches, and we're going to talk about you more, the show, the podcast. Let's start with the Women Who Podcast magazine, because podcasting, obviously, it gets viewed as a platform widely populated by white men. So it's safe to assume you wanted to create a space for women in this realm. But when did you start to notice that women in podcasting needed a place to be heard and recognized?
I think I've been podcasting for 5 years since 2018. And so the more I got into it, the more I met other podcasters. It made me realize that the women were getting the short end of the stick. And then I went to Podcast Expo March 2020, right before the whole world shut down. Um, and there was this other magazine that was launching. And I thought, okay, well, I'll see what this podcast magazine comes up with. Maybe, hopefully, they'll showcase independent women podcasters. So I gave it until like October. And, they had like Katie Couric on the front. And it was just not what I had hoped for. So that's when I came up with the idea reluctantly to start a magazine for women who podcast. And it wasn't, I've never published a magazine before. I had no idea what I was doing. In art school, I had like a class in Illustrator and Photoshop. That was pretty much my experience and my education on that software. And so, I went back and forth. I talked to my friend Sandy Larrys, who's in Australia, who started a magazine earlier that year. And she's also a podcaster of the Good Girl Confessional. And she started this Women Beyond 40, like, network empire. And so I called her up And she pretty much shoved me over the edge and was like, yes, you need to do this. And she was on our first issue. She was the cover on our first issue. And since then, it's been amazing because the women that I've met are they're just so talented and inspiring. They're from all over the world: Australia, New Zealand, India, the UK, Canada, the US, New Zealand. I don't know if I said that yet. It's just all over the place. And it just made me realize that it's not just the US that women need the accolades that they deserve. It's everywhere. And in Africa, podcasting is huge. So I've talked to some people in Kenya about maybe collaborating and having their podcasters showcased. So there's a lot of women out there that don't have a huge team behind them, that need the support, and they need the exposure that they're not normally getting. Because a lot of women that podcast also have a day job or 2 or 3 jobs. They have a family that they're taking care of and part of, and they don't always get the time to themselves. And when life blows up, the first thing that goes is their podcast. So I think it's important to support each other and have that network and that community behind you.
And I know we just finished talking about Tori Amos, but I couldn't help but bring her back up again because she is someone, although I didn't know her music, I knew of her because she was kind of put on this pedestal back in the 90s during that whole Lilith Fair era for just being very feminist, powered. But back to the question I had in mind, what kind of sparked your feminist prowess, that girl power energy? Does that date back to anything in your childhood, or maybe found it in college?
No, and I wouldn't really call myself a feminist. I'm a woman and I support other women, so you can call that whatever you want. I think it's more from an underdog type of mentality, that I've always gone and rooted for the underdog. And I mean, the word underdog might sound negative or weak, but I don't see it that way at all. And I don't see women that way at all. I just feel like there is a huge male presence in podcasting and in the business world. So, I can somehow make a difference in the podcasting world, then I'll do it. So, I've always been supporting women, encouraging others, because I am a woman. So it just makes sense for me to cheer on others that want to be creative, because I also feel like women get the shaft when it comes to creativity. And that, they're not supposed to be creative. They're supposed to be the homemaker and the child rearing and taking care of the kids and the family and the husband or the partner or whatever. And so their passions and their creativity gets squashed. And it's that doesn't fly with me, because I think I've always been creative, and I started doing photography in my 20s, and have, written some books and done other things. So it's important for me to be creative, because if I wasn't creative, I would probably wither away and die. I mean, that's part of my soul. That's what I need to be creative. So I think a lot of women get told no with their creativity because it doesn't make money, or, how are you going to support yourself and all this other garbage. So with podcasting, to me, that's a creative outlet for a lot of women. And I think it's amazing because they can share their story. They can be inspirational for other women, other people, and it's needed. Our voices are needed in this world. And, you're not going to shut us up. That's for sure.
I totally feel you on that whole. It does, but it doesn't make you money because when I graduated college, I only went to college to move away. I had no plans. I was like, I don't know, like, because they in high school, our counselors would come, they would help you pick your schedule for the next year, and bada bing, bada boom. But college, it was like you had to take a little more effort to even see your counselor. I don't even know who that man or woman was in my life. I had never saw them, so I just kind of went, didn't even pick a major until they told me I had to when I was a junior. And I was like, well, what do I have the most credits in? And they
Right.
I'm not going to start over. I'm a junior. And so I went with the most basic one, humanities. And so when I graduated, yeah, there's not a lot of jobs where humanities is a thing. So I got into like writing, and I was like, had no money. So I was like, I was working, like I was interning at a radio promotions company, and the lady's like, well, I had to write CD reviews, and she's like, well, you're really good, you can try to get press passes. And I was like, free concerts, you say? So that's why I started writing. And I remember when I wanted to do it, so many people saying, well, that's not a real job, that's not a real, how are you going to do anything? And so it was kind of discouraging. You always hear that, but I would see all these men like at concerts just taking pictures and doing this, and I'm like, well, it's their job, they're doing it. So I definitely feel that if you can't make money off of it, how could it possibly be real or important? But I'm still doing it. Ha, ha, ha.
Yeah, because you've been podcasting for how long?
I started podcasting in 2021, but I've been writing freelancing since 2010.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah. So what you started podcasting in what you said 2018, being a sort of underdog, like you said, what initial setbacks do you remember having?
Well, just figuring out what I was doing with the podcast, because I had audio and video experience, so I knew that I could edit the audio, and as long as I had the microphones, I had GarageBand, whatever. But it was a learning experience every step, like the host, like what is a host? Like, how do I get this on? How do I get people to listen to this? And then, social media is its own demon, devil, to deal with. But I think I was pretty naive back then when I first started, because I'm just like, well, I'm just going to put this out there, and of course everybody's going to listen, what's the problem kind of thing. But I think going to the expo, the podcast conference in 2020, I mean, you see people there, so you can see the difference, the divide, not necessarily divide, but you can see all the white guys there in person, and you see that it's not equal among, the women of color, even podcasters with disabilities. I mean, it's very one-sided as far as, the white guy podcaster, and they were always the one speaking as well. So that needs to change. I don't know, it may have been shifted a little bit in the last few years, but we have a long way to go, and we're just gonna keep doing our thing, and with the magazine, and help as much as we can.
And you said creativity, it's kind of like just feed your soul. You have to do it, which means that's why you keep going. You have the magazine, you have the podcast, but how do you balance it all? Because like you said, when life gets crazy, the first thing for women to go is like their creative things, their hobbies. So for you, how do you like find the time and balance it? Because I need to know these secrets. I need these tips.
Well, if you sign up for it's only $29.99 a month. No, I think it's all trial and error. I have a day job that's full time. Luckily, I'm able to work from home the majority of the time. So hopefully my boss isn't listening to this. But I do stuff, on the side. I do my job also. But I think, the experts, quote unquote experts, say, well, you have to make the time. Well, I think that adds a little pressure that you have to make the time. I think that because creativity is not something that you are like, okay, between 1 and 2 p.m., I'm going to be creative. It doesn't work that way. It's like if it happens, if you have a spark, if you have an inkling to do something creative and you can, just do it, or write it down. If you have an idea, just write it down. I have a notebook that I keep that I just write stuff down that comes mostly in the shower, but I write it down. And you do have to take the time. You do have to kind of like put that time aside that you want to be creative and just get your mindset to be creative. And then as you do more creative things, then that's going to become more of your priority, and it'll become a lot easier to be creative, and take that step, instead of like having that urge to be creative and then kind of shoving it aside and thinking, well, no, I have to like wash my hair or something. So, I think you just have to do it. And I'm a perfectionist, and I'm a proud perfectionist. I don't think there's anything wrong with being a perfectionist. I think there's, a shadow side of being a perfectionist and a non-shadow side of being a perfectionist. Because one can definitely be detrimental to you, and the other one is not, and can actually enhance whatever you're doing. And as creatives, I think we're perfectionists, and we just have to like accept that part of ourselves and not fight it. And I think our creativity will flourish a lot more.
Yeah, it's tough being a creative perfectionist. And also, it's cruel. It's cruel that most of our good ideas come while we're in the shower and cannot hold a writing utensil.
Right.
You're like, I'll right before bed when I already turned the lights off. I don't have my phone. I keep my phone away from me at night. And you're just like, I'll remember it in the morning. 99% of the time I don't. I thought of something last night and I'm like, what was that? It's gone. Maybe it'll come back. But with both the magazine and the podcast, like what's coming up for both in the new year as we start 2024? Can you believe it?
Well, for the podcast, it's season 3. I finally got smart and decided to create seasons, because for the last 5 years, I was just doing it week to week to week. And earlier this year, I kind of like had a breaking point that I was just doing too much, feeling very overwhelmed. And then I took like a couple months off between, quote unquote, season 1 and season 2. And then the seasons are only like 3 or 4 months, which is great. I can definitely manage that better than just knowing that I have to produce week after week. Mm-hmm. And I've also, for this next season 3, I'm going to be introducing a new co-host, because right now I have Corey as a co-host for one of the episodes. And then usually the first episode of the month was like a guest interview. So I'm kind of shifting it because, as you know, scheduling a guest, especially one like me that forgets that the time difference, so you have to reschedule with them. It's very time consuming. And so I've decided this next season, I'm just going to kind of chill. I'm bringing in a new co-host for that first episode, which I think is going to be awesome. Which the new episode will be the first week in January. And then Corey will continue, coming in as that second episode. And then I'll have my real deep shit episode, which is just me. So that's pretty much the same, except that just shifting up, kind of like shaking it up a little bit for that first episode. And as far as the magazine, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. We're going to be celebrating 3 years in April. So I'm hoping that'll be a huge issue with new writers, because I'm always looking for new writers to either interview featured podcasters or write about podcasting in general. We have a monthly learning community that's only for featured podcasters and writers at the moment. I'm trying to keep it cozy, but I'd really like to start like a mentorship program or a scholarship program for women that haven't quite taken that leap to start a podcast, because either they don't have the financial position to, purchase a microphone or, get set up properly. And I also think that within like 6 or 7, 8 episodes, people realize how much work it really is and decide not to continue. And so the mentorship will help with that. Year mentorship will help them, get started and support them through that first year. Because I think that's really what we need, is we need somebody to mentor women podcasters to get through that first year and realize that, yeah, it's a lot of work, but you can do it if you want to. Because I wish I had a mentor when I first started.
Yeah, I think just in life, we should just get one at like 18. Just be like, how do you do this thing? Like, it's so hard. And I think that's a good thing with the first year, because I think, isn't that like the statistic, after X amount of episodes, people are like, hey, I'm done here.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, as you know. So, I think having a community that supports you and encourages you in a genuine way, not just like, go girl, you got this, but like literally helping somebody, get through the hard times will increase the percentage of women podcasters, because right now I think it's like 29%.
Oh wow.
So, that needs to be increased.
Wow, 29. And we're half the population. That's crazy. So before we go, can you remind people where they can find you, the show, and the magazine online?
You can find Women Who Sarcast podcast on Instagram at Women Who Sarcast, and Women Who Podcast magazine on our website at womenwhopodcastmag.com, or on IG at Women Who Podcast magazine. The magazine and I are also on LinkedIn. I've been fighting that, but I finally decided to give in to that, and I'm on LinkedIn if you happen to be on LinkedIn. And then wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it's Apple, Spotify, you can listen to the show wherever.
All right. Well, wherever you find podcasting, and if you have an internet connection, you're good to go. But Kathy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your musician crush and podcasting. And everyone, you can find all that information below. And until next time, as always, keep crushing it. Crushgasm is part of the I Did Not Make These Rankings podcast network, alongside some other pretty cool shows, including An Evening at the Movies, Crime, Rewind, Literature Reapers, Love is Black, Masturbators, Men Are the Prize, and The Sip List. You can find all of us and more over at idnmtrpodcastnetwork.com.